just like...
I mean, isn't that just like real life?
Yeah. Everyone's always tooting the Putin. Especially
And welcome.
Putin's doing some tooting.
Yeah.
Putin, rest.
Grapefruit.
Rasputin,
I think
while you're grapefruiting.
I also think they did a making of Wet Hot American Summer, which is basically a second movie that's from other perspectives.
Yeah.
Oh, really? From the same day?
Yeah.
I'd be into it.
And welcome to the Down and From podcast. How's it going, everybody?
Hey!
We have a large group here. I'm super excited, guys. I hope that you're excited as much as I am excited.
You look excited.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, my friend. We are going to be reviewing the newest movie of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Spider-Man: Homecoming.
New-ish.
Whip.
Yes.
Yeah, it came out like 5 hours ago. It's not that new anymore.
It's brand new.
It's not as ripe as a grapefruit.
And with us, I have one of my best friends here, Kyle. How's it going, Kyle?
Oh, it's going real well.
Haven't seen you in a while.
Tangy, citrusy. Yeah. Wonderful. How's everyone doing today? Yeah. Hey, you right there, over there? Someone had to clear the throat. Sorry about that. No, mic check. We're just making sure we're all right.
Kyle, what you drinking?
I'm sipping on a Dale's Pale Ale, a 1 pint and 3.2 fluid ounces, so like just shy of 20 ounces.
Fair enough.
Awkwardly skinny but very tall can. Still refreshing. Still wonderful. I guess I should have gotten one of those like big squeezes, you know, the UFOs that Hartman makes.
Yes.
Yeah, and you know the fruit they use to like make those, it's they actually use grapefruit.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a shandy.
I love grapefruit.
It's really good. But alas, they didn't have any, so here I am with a Dale's Pale Ale. It's a classic. Oscar Blues does a great job, and it's very refreshing.
Well, as always, I'm really glad to see your face.
Likewise.
Of course. To his right, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Jesse Kendrick.
Hi.
How's it going, man?
How it's going?
Haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, I missed the last couple podcasts.
It's okay. It's been kind of hot, so we've just been hanging out.
It's fair enough.
What you been sipping on?
I'm doing another one of my mixed Tarani drinks. I'm doing green apple and cupcake, which you'd think would be a terrible mix, but is actually quite delicious.
Oh, green apple.
Green apple and cupcake.
Green apple.
That sounds super fancy. I hope it's good.
Yeah, it's totally awesome. Phenomenal.
To his right, we have his first time in a live recording with us in person.
He is real.
In the flesh.
The flesh. The Mocha Mike.
That's right, I'm not just a CGI'd square.
Like L.I. as in Lord intended. Make that a thing, I'm telling you.
No,
It's
actually
better
here.
than what I had. Yeah, I'm actually here. Super excited to be here. It's great to be back in Boston in general. I'm glad I was able to find some time
In the
to
flesh.
look each of you in the eyes.
In the flesh and real like a grapefruit peel. Like it's just fantastic to see you here.
Yeah, man. It was hot out today. I'm a bit sweaty, which means I'm a bit bitter.
It was hot.
But no, yeah, I'm psyched to be here to chat about one of the movies that I'm most excited for, like, ever, and that's Spider-Man: Homecoming. Fair warning to anyone listening at home, I am completely and utterly biased, so take everything I say with a grain of salt, because I love Spider-Man way too much to let it slide otherwise.
Well, what are you drinking?
So, I'm drinking a harpoon drink that I haven't had before. It's called Camp Wanna Mango. Figure it's summer, it's nice and sunny out. Go with something a little fresh, something a little fruity.
Here you go.
Not too, like, grapefruity.
No, that's what I was saying. Like, yeah, you makes the big squeeze, and that's a shandy, and they use some grapefruit.
Squeeze.
Yeah,
Like the Capri Suns. That's what I call Capri Sun. Big squeeze.
that's right. When you get the like big ones, and you would squeeze, and then you get to drink that. Not quite. They had that idea, but really, what it does is it's a shandy, and they use some grapefruit to make it with. This one actually uses the mango though, so
Yeah, well,
good in its own right, of course.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm an island boy, so I have to go with the mango. It's tradition among white people. So I have to have it tonight. Guillermo can confirm because he too, despite our different colorations, is also of my kin.
Well, speaking of who's next, Mr. Guillermo, how's it going, man?
Whoa!
Haven't seen you in a couple of years since our...
Also in the flesh.
Yes, also in the flesh. Haven't seen you since our Force Awakens trailer. And our
No,
review,
that's
so
not true.
it's-
He was here for Rogue One.
I was here for a while.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I was here for a while.
But it sounded like it was from Force Awakens.
Yes. How you been? What you sipping on?
I'm not sipping on anything.
Okay.
Don't you wish you had a big squeeze? Grapefruit.
And we have next Mike the Shredder. How's it going, man?
So what's happening? Tonight I am endorsing, because that's all this is, right? Product placement. Goose Island, Summertime, Kolsch.
Yes, you had it, Kolsch.
Made with real goose.
I don't know, that's
Kolsch.
German and I don't like it.
Wish.
It has an umlaut, which is redeeming, but, otherwise,
Kolsch.
too many consonants in a row.
I mean, it's
Not brewed with grapefruit. A little bit disappointed.
Disappointing.
Because that would have been refreshing.
Yeah, I just
on a
came on my
night
finger
like
and I'm
this.
craving one right now.
So you will drink and lose weight at the same time.
Fat
It
burn
is.
agents.
Yeah.
Ladies, it
Fat
is a
burner.
fat burner.
Would you say if you had a grapefruit, you could crush it?
I would go all. I'll go
All
Wolverine
minute.
on that. Wolverine. That's another. I feel like that relates tangentially to our topic tonight.
That's could be correct. But
Yeah,
thanks for also
a couple
coming.
copyrights changed for like movie places, yeah, licenses.
Mr. Andrew Abbott, how's it going, man?
Good, good.
Haven't seen you in a couple of years.
I know, I'm back. Last time was Batman vs Superman.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
Wow.
Was a
Sorry,
superhero
many
movie, but
movies.
this one seems to be a complete, 360, 180.
Not
Well, wait, 360, 180 is still technically correct.
That's a 720.
I did the math. I did the math. Get off my back.
That's a sick move on the skate park.
Everybody's like, whoa, wait, hold
In
on.
the Christ air. I am sipping on the UFO Summer Huckleberry, delightfully juicy Hefeweizen with a refreshing berry finish.
Ooh.
So they make it with
Says-
berries. That's weird because they make a UFO called the Big Squeeze and it's made with grapefruit.
I'm pretty sure huckleberry is a kind of grapefruit, just a berry.
Doesn't sound right to me, but I don't have the facts to defend
I am a
so I'm just gonna buy it
vegetarian.
right
I
now.
am a vegetarian.
And you know what? With that gives you license to say those things.
Yeah.
License, automatically licensed. Well, thank you for hanging out with us.
Thank you for having me.
And also the smoothest voice that everybody would hear, Mr. Brylan. How's it going?
It's me, it's the BRILUND. How's it going, fellow high school kids?
Wow, please tell me you were on radio now.
Hold on, yeah. You been doing the yoga?
No.
Because that's a great way to get that GDP yoga out there. Introduce yourself like that. And right now, folks, let us tell you about GDP yoga.
Our sponsor
that's a thing,
tonight
though.
is DDP Yoga.
Oh, it absolutely is.
I can't believe that's a thing.
GDP? Like Diamond Dallas
Oh, he's
Page.
gonna be be at Boston Comic Con.
Yeah.
Or not
He's-
Boston Comic, Northeast Comic
He's
Con.
gonna be at
doing
Worcester,
it.
Mass.
Yeah. And you can
Showing
sign
you all
up
how
for
to yoga.
sessions. Yeah. You
Yeah.
can learn the grapefruit position.
Nice. What'd you sip it on?
I too have enjoyed one of Jesse's Tirani mixed drinks, the green
Same
apple
thing, yeah. Green
cupcake.
apple cupcake.
It is a very refreshing drink. I was very impressed by it. It's a nice balance of sour and sweetness. What I like, it didn't taste like sugar. It tasted like just a refreshing drink.
Nice.
And that's what I was looking for tonight. So, great job, Jesse. You're
See?
awesome.
That's always nice.
That's not bad
I'm glad
mix.
that Jesse can do something right.
Yeah, right.
Thanks for hanging out with us. And last, I'm Warren. I will be your host for this evening. I am currently also sipping on a Camp Wanamango. We also I don't know where that movie is, what that quote's from a movie, but anyways. But thanks for hanging out, guys. I'm super excited. We've been talking about this a lot, literally all night. So I'm really, really pumped to dive into this Jon Watts directed Spider-Man: Homecoming, and let's get into the wins. We're going to talk about the criticisms. We're going to talk about some spoilers and things that surprised us as well. But I'm really, really excited to kind of start off with Guillermo. Your thoughts on Spider-Man: Homecoming?
So this is one of my favorite Marvel movies. I also like the origin story movies a little bit more. And I also really, really appreciated that on this one you can sort of see the Marvel formula. I felt that Doctor Strange, even though it was a very, very gorgeous movie to look at. You can see behind the formula. So I'm like, okay, it wasn't that good. It was good, but it wasn't that good. Same thing with Guardians. It was too formulaic. It was like, okay, cool, whatever. This one was very, very good. They didn't waste any time on explaining us how he was Spider-Man again, which I definitely appreciated. Robert Downey Jr. playing like second fiddle almost, but still having such a good presence in the movie. is very reassuring that it is a universe. I think the movie was very, very pretty. 3D is a little weird still for me. The angle that we were looking at it was still blurry a little bit. So it was throwing me off a little bit, but it was very good. The story was the flow of the story was very natural. It didn't feel like, oh, no, we need to now do this, and then we need to present this character, and then we need to do this. It was very, very good. The big guns, Michael Keaton and Robert Downey Jr. Fuck, they're good. They are such good actors.
I was almost in the clear going into this movie, not having anything spoiled for me, and I'm standing in line because we have an issue with our tickets, and one of my best friends, Mr. Mocha Mike, just goes up and says, "Oh yeah, I'm super pumped that Michael Keaton's in this movie."
All right, well, hold on a second. Here's the thing, though.
No.
Audience at home needs to understand that your host Warren has like the most ungodly ability to avoid any amount of information whatsoever.
I'm good.
I thought that something like actors and actresses was, fair game.
Spoilers.
Even when there's a big ass standee of Spider-Man right at the window of the movie theater.
Well, to be fair, Spider-Man's wearing a mask.
True.
You don't know what the fuck that is.
Of course.
Somehow. Wow.
Of course.
No, but it was good. It was definitely very good.
Yeah,
I really liked it. It was super funny too.
Yeah. I mean, there was just everything like
Classic Marvel.
Yeah,
I
it was
think-
like that very funny. The scenes that were tense were really tense too. It was good. And Jesse knows because we've seen all the Spider-Man movies. I hate Spider-Man.
I've never understood. I've
don't
never
like-
met another person who hates.
I don't like him as a
person, I should
character.
say, that hates.
It was
Spider-Man.
always just ridiculous and stupid, and the banter was just stupid for me. Kind of like what Mike said in the teaser. It really felt like he was 15-year-old, and not like a stupid 15, like a movie character 15-year-old. It actually, you can see him being like, shit, I want to be a kid, but I'm also super aware of my responsibility. And he tried to rise up to this hero of his, which is Iron Man.
Well, he tried to rise beyond his ability.
It was a good movie. It was very good.
The whole time, Stark was saying, "Hey, man, just take it easy.
Yeah.
Just do what you can do because you're 15." And he spent the entire time being like, "No, I deserve to be with these big guns who have been doing it forever." Which, I mean, I think we were all at 15, I can do everything. No, dude, trust me.
Put me in, coach.
Yeah, it's I'm the star athlete. I'm the best musician ever. I can play gnarly clarinet solo, and then I can do kung fu. I'm the perfect human being. That's just who you are at 15. And then once you combine it with someone who can lift a bus with their bare hands, you really drive that near hubris. I wouldn't say quite hubris because it's
super ego.
it's not quite Tony Stark. I can do everything because he knows he can. But he just overestimates himself and doesn't give any time for development.
Yeah, and it's also good to see just that even though he's going to a school for super intelligent technical kids, that whole class body is like that they're still at the base level stupid high school kids.
That was really good. And the last thing before I pass it along, I really liked how they gave him all the superpowers, all the toys, everything in the beginning of the movie, and then they take it away, and that's when he twists.
Yeah.
That was such a good thing too.
I mean, I like it. I think one of the reasons why I also enjoy this, kind of going off of that last point of you're talking about kind of an origin film, and I'm glad we don't need it. We kind of started with literally him having everything, and then he got humble, and he got way more sort of mature in the span of just the movie alone, kind of knowing that. And we definitely kind of expanded on that because there's also a father figure role that I thought was also super cool.
Still some character development on Tony Stark, which is at this point you're like, what else do you need to know about him? He's 20 pictures in.
Yeah.
No, you can still.
He now can take it to the next level, and I'm gonna get into that generational sort of gap of what I was gonna talk about. But Brylan.
Yes.
Tell me some wins about this movie.
One of my favorite things about this movie was just the subtle nuances they had for Spider-Man as a character, whereas if he's swinging from a web after he jumps off the web, it's just dangling right there.
Yeah,
you see that behind you.
Small
So,
thing, but that was cool.
Nice little detail there.
And they kept it consistent all throughout the movie. It was pretty cool.
And they answered one of my favorite things is like, how does Spider-Man swing in the suburbs? And he doesn't. he has to run down the street. And that was like one of the best action scenes ever because it was funny as hell, but also really awesome to see how he handled like out of his natural element of swinging among the skyscrapers as well.
I would say even going on to that point, like for right now, if you haven't necessarily seen this movie, you probably want to pause. We will be actually talking about tons of spoilers and things that probably gonna ruin you. So I would say take a second, about maybe 5 to 10 seconds, pause it, go watch the film, come on back, and then you can resume our podcast of Spider-Man.
Awesome. So another great one I think is just the story's theme overall is just about what it takes to be a great hero, and go over and get beyond like the selfishness of just wanting to be cool and be noticed. And I think it's really telling when you see Tony Stark, who we've seen in past Avenger movies. He's been kind of the catalyst that fucks up a little because of his selfishness and causes a lot of havoc in the world. That he's trying his damnedest to be a mentor to this kid and be better than what he's been, because he knows what happens when you go down that path. And I mean, Peter doesn't really learn from that. But it's really cool to see at the very end when he realizes what he needs to be Spider-Man. When he's fighting Vulture, that his concern is not to beat Vulture, but to just make sure he stops from stealing and also even protect his life as well.
I do like that. That was like a big thing of, this guy hates me, this guy wants me dead, this guy has been trying to kill me for this long time now that I know who he is, and he's connected to this girl who I have like the best crush on. I still have a duty, right, to save a life, like, because at least in his eyes, I felt like nobody needed to die. So that's pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as always, I appreciate it. Jesse, what you got for some wins?
I think one of my favorite things with superheroes is when you see like a day in a life of superheroes. So there was like that first kind of like third of the movie where he's like going around, he's like rescuing like, you know, somebody's stolen bike.
Yeah.
And like little things like that. And he screws up trying to like stop somebody from breaking into a car, and they're like, well, it's my car. And it's just seeing like that little montage, there were so many times in this movie where I was like, man, I wish I could just pause it, rewind it like just 30 seconds just so I could rewatch the sequence again.
Yeah.
Like, for example, there was when he like goes through and starts like web slinging the boat together, I like look down and I see him doing all these crazy spirals, and then I have to look over and like look what he's doing, and I'm like, I bet I just missed a ton of really cool like just character emotion there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, man, I wish I could just rewind it just to see that, because there's too much to like really take it all in.
Yeah.
Just
Just living in that moment a little bit longer is always like,
always
fun.
And like those were the things that I'm thinking of, just because I know other people are gonna want to talk about like Mike Keaton, and like that was all interesting. And the other thing too is like the Marvel mythos, them being able to bring in just, you know, they had 2 Shockers, they had the Tinkerer, they had like Scorpion makes a cameo, just bringing in all these bits, and it didn't feel like shoehorned in.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And as a comic book fan, like they didn't make it blatantly obvious either. They were like, oh, like one of the Shockers is wearing like a mock Shocker costume, and you're like, oh my god, that's so cool, but like nobody else would really, like, I don't know, it was just a little, very much acknowledging where they came from.
I picked up on it
yeah.
and like tapped one.
Yeah.
He's wearing the Shocker outfit.
And then you get zapped, and I was like, all right, maybe not him.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty cool moment. Kyle, want to continue?
For sure. A win that I liked is, like we said, like you don't need to tell the origin story, and I like how they didn't beat the dead horse, or in this case, dead uncle phrase of it, and just like Uncle Ben is like implied just once by like, well, oh man, I just can't do this after what she's been through.
Yeah.
And that's about
That's
it.
enough.
Otherwise, like, it's more about just like, well, he's a teenager, he's overeager, he's figured out these powers, he's had this amazing opportunity with the Avengers and everything. So it's just playing it from a whole new angle. So you it just feels very fresh. A new take on Spider-Man, just because we've now twice been told the tale, and of course it's very important, but it's same thing with how in Batman vs Superman they're like, cool, don't tell. All right, here's a little bit of the origin story, but you can't help but fall back on that laurel of he lost his parents, and that's a big character moment. But it seems like movies so far for the Batman character can't get away from that. They were able to get away from it. It's only, it was alluded to in Civil War, and even more lightly alluded to. It's more about Peter Parker and figuring out his place in the world, and mostly a teenager, overconfident superego, and trying to do that. So I actually appreciate that they didn't just throw in there this is the root of my pain and my character conflict. Instead, he had new pain, he had new conflict, he had to figure out new things about himself without being it all goes back to this. And it's nice to not have that deeply rooted story that I just hear from 3 different angles.
I would say that I thought it was impressive, and they've done this before in past movies, but they did it well in this one, that the biggest point of struggle was not, I have to live up to my uncle's expectations. It was, I have to somehow navigate the world between Peter Parker and Spider-Man. That scene where he's looking down at all of his classmates, including I don't know, we've all had high school crushes. Can you imagine just hanging out in some crazy adventure, and you said no to go do something else? How many of us could have done that at that age?
I went to an all-guys school, so I was always...
So, like we said, when Andrew was sitting there looking down at his crush in a swimming suit. So I really thought that they did a great job, because you're right, they did a great job of fixating on Spider-Man versus Peter Parker rather than Uncle Ben. And that was the point of contention. That, again, they did it in, I think it was Spider-Man 2, did a good job bouncing between the 2 lives, but they really captured that in this one as well.
Yeah, I'm super pumped. Andrew, Abbott, what you got for wins?
I got a few. A lot of you guys have already touched on them. One thing that I know they've done in other Marvel movies that I think is really cool with this one is they don't start here's Peter, here's Spider-Man. They start with the bad guys. And so they introduced, Vulture, they introduced Tinker, they introduced all these guys right off the bat, and they give you some really solid motivations for why they do what they do and how they get to where they are when the movie actually starts cooking. And I think that's really great, because especially a guy like Michael Keaton, after he was in Birdman, and then years ago when he was Batman, you see him now as Vulture, and you're shit, this guy knows what he's doing at this point, and he's gonna be bad.
Yeah,
he is, and he's awesome.
That was really cool, is that you're just watching some blue-collar Joes be
Get
contracted to do a cleanup job, and it's just
and
they're the most New Yorkers, and then the government comes in and takes their job away.
Well, but it was also relatable too, where so compared to this to one of the worst Marvel movies, Malekith's motivations make absolutely no sense. I have no relationship to a space elf from 4 billion years ago.
Try hard.
That's not my backstory, But I've certainly been at a place where I've been kind of screwed over for money or screwed over for work, and then you harbor ill feelings toward the person that did that to
and you steal alien technology.
Yeah, and then you use it to rob banks, but not incriminating at all. So I think that really, it grounded that character, and this is what works in these movies. Civil War, I thought really worked. Batman vs Superman really worked because my mom's name happens to be Martha. Oh. But if you can,
Yes, you.
We're friends now.
If you can get the audience on the bad guy's side, it makes for a better movie.
Yes.
And so I could really feel for him.
Yeah.
And I could understand that, and his motivation, unlike Malekith, that he just wanted to I guess I'll end the universe, including myself, so I guess it's a suicide thing, whatever. It was literally just for his kids, and again, I think all of your parents, for the most part, want to see their kids succeed and do better than they did.
Yeah.
And that really is a great motivation.
But also one thing that I feel that it made you, or at least me, made it even more believable was when they actually figure out who they were. It was just, dude, just walk away. Let me do my thing. You do your thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't like,
it was
now
very
I know.
respectful.
Mwahaha,
It was
I wanna
almost like
kill
a
you.
business transaction.
Yeah, it was like,
you do your thing,
it
I'll
was
do
like,
my thing, we'll go
bro,
our
I
separate
get
ways.
it.
Yeah.
You have powers, you want to do your thing, but I want to do my thing too. Let's just walk away.
Even in that scene, I really felt like that showed that he had a lot of knowledge just as a villain. In that moment, that writing and the directing in that scene was, oh my gosh, the entire audience was like, yes, you know why? Because if I was in that situation, I would have made the same fucking correlation.
Well, that's what Jesse said.
It was-
Jesse said that he was a very intelligent guy.
Right.
Well,
I
one
was
thing I
gonna
was thinking
say.
about too in that scene, he pulls a gun out and puts it behind the seat rest. Never once actually points it at Peter. It's more of a defensive move in case Peter attacks him in the car.
Also, it's very consistent too, his behavior in that scene with who that character is, right? You said that you're supposed to be able to sympathize with these villains. This is someone who was down on their luck. You know, capitalism ruined him that moment, and so he went to dealing with weaponry. But in that moment, you know, you have this moment where you realize that the whole reason why he wants that to stop there and then isn't because he's afraid of fighting Spider-Man or because of what it might do with his business. He wants to keep his daughter safe, and he's like, if like she's like linked up with this kid, I don't want this to have to go to anything violent whatsoever because who knows how that will affect her. And I just thought it was really consistent with the fact that he's not. He's the antagonist, but he's justified in a lot of ways, and he's being honest whenever he says, "I'm doing this for my family."
And it's really awesome. Like you see him with his high tech shit on, but even at the very end, he's still just a thief. I mean, he's not going even beyond that to be like a supervillain.
Yeah, he's not assassinating
Actually,
people.
that's like
He's
that's
just
a good
trying
point.
to take them from the rich.
He even said there was like one line, this one box, and we're set for life. So that was also something. That's all that they were trying to do.
I think they also drove home the point that there was. So I forget who was going to mention it later, but the separation of like the hero fighting the villain, and I can let whoever that is chime in more, but I think that it really, he was the analog to Tony Stark, not to Spider-Man. And that was a really interesting dynamic where he was really the dark yang of Stark, where he was the father figure for Liz, and you could see they had the exact same relationship. Like, hey, I don't want anything to happen to my daughter. I don't want anything to happen to my Peter. I really I need to protect it.
I don't want
It's
anything to happen to my
just
Peter.
like, you know, they neither of them wanted to be overextended. Neither of them wanted their quote unquote kids to be like in any sort of public eye. They just wanted to do their own thing and then raise this person to be the best individual they could. And so the struggle of the child versus the father figure was pretty cool and interesting to watch.
And that, if I can jump back in, one of the things that I've sort of noticed based on like what we've been talking about is there's this overall theme of like development and maturity. And the more that I've thought about it, it's like the other Spider-Man movies, he gets his powers, we go over the origin stuff, Uncle Ben dies, and then he learns how to control everything in a montage. This movie, it's the whole movie. He's still learning things. Not only is he learning his powers, but he's also trying to figure out this suit that Stark gives him. He has no idea what's going on. It takes him the whole movie, and still at the end of the movie, he's still fucking shit up. Like, he still doesn't know what he's doing. But also, like, Tony Stark is a dude with daddy issues suddenly playing father to this fatherless kid. We don't hear Uncle Ben's name at all. We don't hear with great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, that's a good point.
Never
Yeah,
said
there's
once.
a lot of things that are absent from these other movies that are replaced by this like weird like character development for everybody. Like Peter, Tony Stark, Vulture at the end of the movie where it's like, oh shit, like he's gonna give him up and he's gonna tell everybody that he knows who he is, and he's like, nope, that one's mine, I'm keeping it for myself. He could have just easily blew up his spot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think everybody's sort of evolving throughout this entire movie.
Speaking of the evolution and like Tony Stark now like forced into the father figure role, I'd like to point out, so great evolution where Parker is literally begging to be an Avenger.
He has several moments where he's like, "Oh God, I sound like my dad."
Yep.
He says that like 3 or
Said
4
it
times.
several
Well, no.
times.
So I want to go. So like Parker starts off the movie like, "Hey, I'm an Avenger. I'm an Avenger. I'm an Avenger. I'm in the Stark internship program. I gotta be an Avenger." And then at the end, it's like kind of ham-fisted, but he turns it down, you know, which is like, oh, there. The point is that like Stark was forced into that father role that he clearly had no idea on. Like, this movie is a spiritual successor to Iron Man 3, where the hero loses his suit and figures out that the suit isn't the one who defines him. Like, seriously, like, Spidey was thinking, well, the only reason I really could steal Cap's shield is because I had this crazy cool suit that can do all these crazy things. And then he finds out, well, no, I can save my city just because of who I am.
I mean, you can do a lot of things in sweatpants.
Exactly. Yeah. I do everything in sweatpants. But it's one of those. But the other thing I want to say is at the very end when Stark was like, "Yeah, that was like this that I was trying to teach you." He's like, "Yeah, that's he's kind of."
That's part of it is everybody's sort of learning lessons.
Right. Exactly. And they showed that Stark wasn't the perfect mentor. That he clearly. At the end of the movie, they weren't this finalized human being. They were still in development, which most of these films you see the end result is the finalized human being, which makes it really hard to pick up a sequel because where do you go on the perfect character?
Yeah.
This one's like, I know where the sequel's gonna go.
Yeah.
You're gonna
Well,
continue to develop it.
Yeah, because now he goes into like high school to like college. You can talk about like love and like difficulties and like choosing between like love and like work and there's a lot of complexities that makes it interesting.
Exactly.
Of just showing how someone grows up. It doesn't have to be a boy or a girl or however you necessarily would like to call yourself.
Saying now you guys are saying about the sequel, how they dropped that MJ camp. It's not really even a cameo, but they make you realize who MJ is.
Yeah, the reveal.
Fuck, that is so good.
Yeah. I was gonna say one of my big wins.
So good.
Is the last 5 minutes. Like you had what is it 4 or 5 big reveals?
Yeah, it wraps things up in a very exciting way.
Yeah, at the MJ, which I was like, oh my god. You had
Which you already loved that character.
Yeah, she
By
was so
that
cool.
Point,
yeah,
you already loved her.
She was so fun.
She taught me so much. The Washington Monument was built by slaves.
Yeah.
Yeah. you had the questionable Iron Spider, which for again speaking of comic book nerds, we've been waiting to see this suit for I guess never, because he's never interacted with another Marvel superhero, but whatever. You had Aunt May actually finding out, which what? That's like end game, results on these sort of films, and here they are dropping it in the first film, and then the classic Captain America reveal that he knows that you're watching for nothing.
With Paltrow?
Oh, Gwyneth Paltrow is back together with Iron Man doing that. Yeah, I forgot about her.
That was awesome.
That was a really nice surprise.
Yeah. Blue, any other wins?
Yeah, I think so. I think we talked about how it was very awkward. Like they were 15-year-olds actually seeming like 15-year-olds. They.
How dare they?
I know. I thought they really extended the universe very well. Like we've been talking about this, and we've mainly been talking about Stark. And then like the ancillary Spider-Man villains, but they made a lot of references to like a lot of other things. Like subtly, they hinted that Tony wasn't quite done with Steve. The prototype, which I'm slowly getting absolutely hyped about. Like I was like, oh yeah, so they're gonna talk again. Oh yeah, because they're producing Infinity War. I want to see what the shield looks like right now. Like, like the prototype of that, Thor's belt, apparently like a new Hulkbuster outfit. Yeah. Like, they really had a lot of these, like, without busting out the big guns of like Oscorp or, Doc Ock or like any of these big things, they really extended that universe. I thought it was paced very well. It just, like, I think Guillermo said this, it just went one scene to the next and didn't feel rushed, but it also just, like, logically followed everything. 2 last things. The first is that it felt like New York, where they race-bent a lot of these characters, and you could see, like, it was an inner-city Brooklyn school. Like there was black people, there was Asian people,
Queens,
there was, yeah, bro. Sorry, I got the wrong borough. There was brown people. Like it was it. There was even white people. Shocker. So
Well, there was a white and black shocker.
yeah.
In an ever gentrifying.
Yeah, but so it didn't feel. It felt authentic to a high school experience. You know, I guess if you could say like the CEO board, like in Iron Man 1, like fair enough. Like I guess predominantly that's going to be white if anything has taught us, and we're trying to break that mold, but you know, whatever. But you could not have an inner city New York school without showing some sort of diversity, and kudos for doing that.
Yeah,
my last win was that they broke the fourth wall. Finally, after 14 movies, Captain America's like end thing was
post credits.
unbelievable.
Yeah,
like they started such a movement of mid and post credit scenes that DC had to come out and say, we will not do this because we are not Marvel. And so here they are finally coming out being like, yeah, we got nothing. Why are you still here? Go home.
Yeah.
But the Captain America PSAs were also some of the best comedy moments.
Yeah, those are sprinkled in so perfectly in a lot of different moments to say that you've seen this video and clearly the gym or whatever, the multi-use teachers like, hey, yeah, so I have to put this in, which is Hannibal Buress, which is also hilarious. This is really
Love that guy.
It was great.
Your gym teacher right here, and just how he like smiled and
When he
winked.
says, I'm pretty sure he's a war criminal now.
pretty sure he's a war criminal.
That's the Captain America.
But I haven't played this, so there you go.
So you're in detention now.
Yeah. I mean, like, a couple of things that I would necessarily say before I hand this over to the Mocha Mike was, I just like a lot of these moments that we had a chance, much like Jesse was talking about, just like hanging with the characters. I think to add to the bit of the awkwardness, like the relationship between Peter and Ned, like how that necessarily grows, because if your best friend finds that you're a superhero, they're gonna try to do as much as you can, but as much as they can, and I really like the fact that he really wanted to try to help him. At one point, it was like, "Hey, I want to make sure I don't spoil this, but I also want to help you because this is the coolest thing ever." I think it really kind of got a lot of the motivations of if you're a 15-year-old superhero and your best friend's the same, like that's exactly how that friendship will go. So we had a chance to just spend a lot of time with them, talking to themselves and kind of finding a lot of stuff out. And just even like the relationships that was necessarily built, like much like Abbott and Bradley was talking about, of you see a lot of father figure, and you see the fact that Tony's father was alcoholic and he felt that he was Tony's father like drank a lot in like portrayed in the movies, as Tony also does too, and it was portrayed that he never really had a good relationship with his father at all, and we now know that through the entire movies, and we now know that, you know, his father was killed by Bucky, and this whole other stuff that we necessarily get in that. Spoiler alert from 4 years ago. So the fact that now it's flipped in the script of Tony being like a father figure and trying to do like be better, and I just like the small bits of dialogue that they use of, "Oh, I'm sounding like my father." He literally are saying things that, like Blue was talking about, he learned from the first movie. He's now learned from the 5 movies he's been in as. 5, now 6, yeah. Movies he's been 7. Sorry, movies he's been in there's probably more, whatever. As Tony Stark. So I think that was extra people. Mocha, want to finish us off with the wins?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, everyone's made a bunch of really good points. I want to get a little specific with my wins. First off was like huge shout out to Marvel for finally breaking free of the trend that people have called them out for movie after movie, which is pitting a hero against a mirror of that hero in its first outing. We've seen it so many times. Ant-Man versus Yellow Jacket, Iron Man versus Obadiah Stane, Hulk versus Abomination, Doctor Strange versus Caecilius. And what they did with Spider-Man was they took a character that was very, very different in terms of function and form from Peter Parker, and made him into, but still made him someone that acted as a proper foil. You know, you have the battle between young and old, you know, between Peter being 15 and him being, you know, a father of a family. You have someone who's jaded with life, or jaded by life in the Vulture, versus a kid who's still super optimistic because he hasn't really experienced much of the world. Mm-hmm. You have two characters that both rely almost entirely on technology to be who they are as heroes or villains, despite them being very different in how they approach that technology. I just thought that was really well thought out and well planned and made for a really interesting antagonist throughout. Moving further on that point as well, and I mentioned this in the promo, but shout out to Marvel as well for like taking the Vulture, who in the comics is literally just a geriatric in a skin-tight suit with wings who flies around and kicks Spider-Man in midair, and making him into probably what I would argue as one of the top 3 coolest villains in the entire MCU. The visual redesign was crazy good. He looks so cool. I mentioned earlier in our previous chat that I would have never thought of running a concept of the Vulture as with a jet pilot theme. He had that awesome bomber jacket with the ruffles. He had an actual fighter pilot mask underneath the actual technology, and it was just so cool and added a lot of vitality to a character that otherwise was just a middle-aged dude.
Yeah.
Middle-aged blue-collar dude.
I couldn't help but think back at the animated series or the video games where just an old man who just has that feathered collar because it makes him look like the bird.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just it. Instead it was that jacket, I was like, I never would have thought of that. That's a really cool way to interpret it.
Yeah.
It almost had a weird steampunk Rocketeer vibe to it too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That brown leather jacket. Yeah, and he was more than just a one-trick pony. When he fought, he was super intense. Every time he showed up on screen, he used every advantage he could, whether that be dragging Spider-Man up to an unreasonable height in order to throw him off his balance, or remote piloting his wings to affect his environment instead of attacking Peter himself. He fought in as many different ways as he could and was just as scrappy as Peter was. And I thought that it was an awesome pair up. I was really, really impressed with what they did there. As well as with the other villains too. They reconceived of villains like the Shocker in really cool modern ways that I definitely appreciated.
Yeah. And Michael Keaton was intense in hell.
Oh yeah, he was fantastic. He was great.
Even when you find out he's Liz's dad, that's probably the most intense moment in this.
That was the best part.
Yeah, when he opens the door and Peter has to walk in and be cool while he realizes that the person that's been trying to kill him all this time is his crush's dad.
And he wasn't cool.
Yeah, it was. It was intense. It was almost like a horror movie feel where you just know that if that guy finds out what he knows, that he's just gonna snap and try to find a way to kill the kid.
That was the other thing too, is he was super smart that he put it all together in the car ride back.
So
he was able to just piece it all together.
Oh wow, that guy that just uses his brain and reasonable deduction.
He just was oh yeah, well he was in DC, you were in DC, just puts it all together.
The one thing I'd say that scene might have been the closest that Marvel's ever gotten to a stylized color palette. With the light shading.
Yes.
They've never done anything like that.
Yeah.
It's usually just
haven't.
here is light, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, one of the most impressive, really subtle details in the entire movie for me was as Michael Keaton, as the Vulture, is driving Peter and his prom date around. He's talking to them and slowly putting together in his mind who he is, and as they're driving, the lights are passing on his face. And he pulls up to a red light as he makes the realization of that Peter is Spider-Man. And you get this villain look on his face when you see that he realizes, and the red light glows on his face. So you just get this slight red hue the entire time that he makes the connection, and then starts talking to Peter knowingly that he's Spider-Man. He's someone that he has to kill. And it was just a beautiful, delicate touch that I was really, really impressed with. Another cool thing about this movie too, in terms of following trends, this was sort of started with Civil War, but I love the fact that Marvel is starting to take a really consistent look at the repercussions for the actions of their characters. This was started with Civil War. That's what that entire movie was about, with the Sokovia Accords, with the government trying to make sure heroes were under control. But in this movie, they also take a look at what happens in the fallout from the battle over over Manhattan with the Chitauri invasion. What happens when, as Michael Keaton says in the beginning, the government comes in or the Avengers, the people who caused damage in the first place, start profiting off of repairing that damage, and what that means for normal people who are just trying to live their lives. And I hope that it remains a consistent theme moving forward throughout the rest of Phase 3, maybe even into Phase 4 a bit. Because I think it gives it's a really cool take on what's otherwise cheery, happy, we beat the bad guy, let's go home and forget about it until the next one, comic book tropes.
I mean, that's why I even enjoyed a lot of the Age of Ultron, because I think they brought that up a lot to the point that, Incredible Hulk and, Iron Man just demolishes this place and just completely destroys it. And I think they even said that there has to be some stakes. Like, you have to be accountable for your actions.
Yeah.
And that movie, I think, was a lot about it, and the Sokovia Accords and all that stuff that was going too. But at least you see that now we get a different perspective of, well, the damage is there, so there's people that needs jobs to kind of clean that stuff up. And once they get screwed over, not only are they causing all the bad stuff that's happening and not taking responsibility, but then they're still profiting over the fact that people's lives are ruined.
Yeah.
I think that was an interesting concept to bring up.
Yeah, and it's super timely also, just in the sense of, looking at what at least our world is like today. This movie took a bit, like a serious enough for a comic movie look at what does it mean when, like, the lower or the middle class person is trampled over by the super wealthy, by the government that doesn't have to care about them because they've got bigger fish to fry, by the very concept of capitalism itself. So I thought it was just, like, timely as well, without being ham-fisted.
Yeah. And even, like, Peter's kind of approach to, like, why he turned down the suit, it says, there's people still in my city that needs me. Nobody's going to look up for the little guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I thought it was funny because that was almost a line that Cap uses earlier in the universe. And I think that's another thing of, well, nobody else is going to do it, so I'm going to be like the people's hero, or like the people's champ.
There was one other cool win I wanted to bring up real quick, which was their use of your standard high school movie tropes. Specifically, like going to the popular kid's house for a house party. That is like a super big fancy house, and you're like, oh, this crap again.
Yeah.
But they pay it off so well.
That was gonna be like my critique turned win, because I was like, that's so not relatable. Like, how does this keep happening?
Yeah. But there's a reason why it's a big
But then when you
house.
and then when you returns back to the house, I was like, wait, is it gonna be like, and that's why she has that house, because and he's realizing it as you are, and like you're sharing that experience with Peter.
Such a good one.
That was gonna be one thing I really wanted to talk about, so I'm glad you pointed that out.
Where he's running, and then it's like, this is like that scene in Ferris Bueller.
Yes.
And then I think they should have taken it deeper, and then there's like, but then this is like those Domino's commercials. They don't stop playing.
And they also had a great, way of explaining like a modern bully.
Yeah.
Like in the past, it's always been like Flash Thompson in the comics. He's a big athletic jock, and he's always like pressing Peter up against the lockers or something like that. Whereas this Flash Thompson is a half-ass DJ, just loudmouth that just will.
He calls him Penis Parker.
He just berates Peter incessantly, and that's why he's a bully. It's not about being physically tougher than him. It's more just like, I'm just going to take you down a peg because I can, I'm rich, and I'm still popping my collar even though it's 2017.
He had two collars.
I mean, that's the only way to do
Well, if
it.
you're going to pop one, might as well pop two.
Yeah, pop. Fun don't stop.
Mocha, you want to finish off on the wins before we get into credit system?
Yeah, the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to wins, and this is more of like a, bird's eye view type of thing, but
Vultures?
Vulture review, yeah. But I'm really, really glad that Marvel and Sony, these two giant mega companies, were able to make nice and come to terms over a deal for the sake of the character. For anyone who's listening at home and doesn't really know, a quick rundown is that Sony had bought the movie rights to Spider-Man a couple decades back. Now that Marvel is successfully running its MCU, there are certain characters and titles that they don't have access to. Spider-Man was one of them. And in order to get it, essentially they had to tell Sony that they would do all the work, all the creative work in producing an excellent movie that Sony could rely on being a blockbuster. And Sony would retain all the revenue from the box office.
What?
But Marvel gets all the merchandising rights. So Marvel needs to take their creative approach in order to make sure that the character is protected and it works in their quilt.
What?
Sony gets their money, and it works out for both companies and the audience, because this was, in my opinion, the most thoughtful version of Peter Parker's Spider-Man of all the movies that have come out. And I do like the Sam Raimi movies, and I don't hate the Amazing Spider-Man movies. But as someone who grew up a fan of Spider-Man, this movie felt special in terms of how they approached it, and that's awesome to see two companies come to terms like that.
Everybody gets rich.
One thing I gotta interject on that same note, though, that is interesting for Warren to see now that you've seen Spider-Man, is Sony also footed the bill for all their advertising. So all of the trailers that you've seen and all the posters that you've seen are all made by Sony. So if you look at like some of the really good Marvel trailers, and now that you don't have an embargo anymore, Warren, you should watch the Spider-Man trailers because they're the worst out of any of them.
Oh yeah, that's what I think you and Mike was actually talking about that.
They have the largest summer blockbuster advertisement budget. And that's all Sony. It's all like they literally dropped Spider-Man. If Spider-Man could be drinking a Coke, watching an Apple, on a MacBook, they got that. Yeah. They completely had that commercial.
Yeah.
And all of the posters too have been not up to snuff.
They have been great, yeah.
Well,
nah.
Marvel
not quite the Black Panther.
Yeah, Marvel doesn't do posters very well.
Yeah, it's fair.
I'm almost got to watch the trailers this year.
Did you see the Mondo Spider-Man poster though? That one was dope. It's like fully illustrated. It's beautiful. Check it out.
Yeah. Well, hopefully hopefully Spider-Man will be super successful for not only for us as viewers, but also for both companies, and that'll be an impetus for Fox to stop fucking around with the Fantastic Four.
Well, I'm super excited. I'm very glad. I've learned so much just from listening to you. I really love the fact that we can all talk about and share all of our wins because they're all going to be different. So I'm super glad that we can have this in person. But at some point, not all movies are perfect. So I'm interested to hear, let's talk about some criticism or some things that probably didn't work for us. And that's just probably going to get into a bit of debates because I know that people have some conflicting ideas here. So I'm super excited to talk about. Bradley, what's some things that didn't work?
I would say the big criticism I have for it is some of the CG work, especially in the beginning on the New York rooftops, was pretty shoddy. I mean, you could definitely tell that Spider-Man was kind of a ragdoll animated character a lot of times when he was jumping rooftop to rooftop. And on top of that, what made it kind of worse was there were some shots that just didn't really work for me. There's this one scene where it just pulls back to let's show the biggest, greatest New York City rooftop scene ever, and you have little tiny CG Spider-Man in the corner, and he says some type of funny quip, and I'm just like, wait a minute, where's... Oh, there's Spider-Man.
Yeah, he screwed up his web spin and then ate it.
And I would love to have seen that a bit more close up so I could tell what was going on. Another thing that didn't really work for me is when he got tangled up in his parachute, having kind of the camera inside the parachute with his head moving around was just really weird and awkward.
Yeah.
And it it just threw me off a bit. It just was confusing.
Well, the other thing, I definitely kind of agree for that moment because I was hoping that something would malfunction in the suit or there's some sort of mechanism in the suit that was hey, you can't do this. But it was a little parachute from the suit that causes him to almost drown.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, that's kind of weird that happens, but all right, whatever.
Yeah, but that was pretty much my biggest criticism of it.
Cool. Criticism. I'm gonna toss it over to Guillermo.
Mine is simple.
Okay.
But complicated for me. It's the movies are so big. You see Guardians and it's 100 different things happening at the same time. You see this one is big. These are big movies, kind of what Brian was saying. At some point you don't know what to look at, or no, it was Jesse. You were saying you want to rewind certain scenes.
Oh yeah.
Because you want to look back, because you're there's so much things happening, and I think that one of the reasons that I really liked Iron Man 1 and Ant-Man was kind of sort of brought it down to a little bit more just have less craziness. But that's the only thing. There's a lot on these Marvel movies that are just happening at the same time. But at the same time, that's what makes them really cool because you have so many dynamic and you have characters that have full on use of their powers, and they use their powers accordingly to the particular scene. And you have it because you can do crazy things at the same time, which is kind of cool. But yeah, sometimes you're like, I don't know what
Yeah.
to look, and this is just like, or really, really fast action.
That's why I do like, repeat viewings of it. I think that is probably going to help, but then at the same time, a repeat viewing of this movie, right, that's like then $40.
Yeah.
And it's just like, man, like, should I be able, it's a very good point of, I'm arguing to the fact that I should be able to notice that in the first viewing, or is it because maybe I'm focused on something too much, that there's so many things, so many small things they can sprinkle around, that I may not necessarily notice, because I think somebody even maybe missed the fact that, Stan Lee's cameo, which we didn't mention, I don't think we talked about it in the wins, that entire yelling, arguing, cross
But it was fun,
scene,
though.
That entire dialogue, the fact that they put that in that had really nothing,
That was
like,
fun.
it had nothing to do of the movie, it was just something fun of, hey, they're in the city, and I think we talked a lot about diversity and like knowing their particular environment was super fun.
But that would be the only one. It's just there's a lot that happens in these movies, and it's cool because it makes them great. But at the same time, you almost feel like, shit, should I? You almost feel bad that you're missing things, almost, because you know that they try to put in as much fan service as they can. So you almost feel bad that you miss it, just because there's a lot of things happening, but it's what makes them great.
Yeah. And I probably felt that the most, actually, when the final fight with Vulture on top of the airplane. It was just all over the place and couldn't really keep up with what was going on.
And it was a bit dark, so
it was super dark.
It was very dark it was dark, and they implied, and they actually sort of put in the fact that the plane has reflective, so it's not only dark, but it's reflective, so you can't tell. I definitely can kind of see that. I mean, Guillermo, there's a movie that did this much worse. You should go watch Transformers last night, because there's a ton of shit that happened in that movie that simultaneously you're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm watching right now. It's a great movie.
I don't know what movie we were watching. I told somebody, like, it's incredible that now you can have, you have in the 70s, you have, like, I don't know, The Godfather, and it was just the scenes where, like, these two people talking super, super close, and now you can have battles with gods. Like, it's just, because you can do that now in film and CG and all these things where it's, like, the scope. There's no end to the scope. Yeah. Like, it's insane how much you can do.
Some people call that a no-scope.
A no-scope?
That's a really good But the people who laugh, they like the jokes. So.
They're just tired.
Yeah. With criticisms, Andrew, what do you got?
At first I thought, like, don't get me wrong, I love the movie, but the further I get away from it, even though we're like an hour or two away from having seen it, being a Spider-Man purist, there are some things that I can nitpick at. One of the things was, like, I read some articles where Tom Holland was so happy of doing his own stunts, but a lot of it just did really seem like, I don't know if that's him in the suit.
Yeah.
A lot of it sounds like he just did, like, voiceover work, so I don't trust that kid. He did a great job in the Peter Parker roles, but I don't think that's really him. And so there were scenes where, like, Spider-Man's really far off, but you hear the voiceover like he's, like, the same distance from the camera or the microphone or whatever he's doing. And, like, he still emotes very well, but I wanted to see more of the eyes. Like, they stressed the fact that those eyes were going to be very emotive, and I think they could have stressed that more so.
Yeah.
But on the other side of that coin, the fact that he had this crazy technologically advanced suit kind of bugged me a little bit, and that, it was talking to his suit, like, he did all this, like, wackadoo stuff, and, like, as cool as that was, like, I wanted, like, old school Spider-Man with his suit. This is the closest to looking the way that I've always wanted it to look. It was great, but there were too many bells and whistles on the inside. Going back to what Brian was talking about, the part with the parachute, in the comics when Vulture does take him up high, like in one of their original encounters, and drops him, Spider-Man improvises a parachute out of web, like out of nowhere, like just, and it seems like crazy schlocky comic book stuff, but I almost would have preferred that than like some parachute shooting out of his butt. Where did that come from? That's a skin-tight costume. Where was he keeping that?
It was the Spider-Man.
Like the drone came out of the Spider-Man.
Still, that was like you have to pack a parachute into that. Yeah, I mean,
he's building a shield on the planet. I'm sure you can fit a parachute into a tiny spider.
I dig all the technology, but there's part of me that just wants, like, there hasn't been, like, this was like a 98% perfect Spider-Man.
I totally get where you're coming from as, like, a Spider-Man purist. I grew up reading Spider-Man comics. They're one of the first things that I started reading when I was a kid. But what I did like about this movie, and I think looking at this perspective gives it a bit of leeway, is that they did a good job with this movie of blending a lot of different elements of Spider-Man, like original Spider-Man 616, current Peter Parker as like the head of Parker Industries 616, and even a little bit of the Ultimate Peter Parker like 1610 universe. They blend a lot of different elements to sort of give us a fresh take on how it went, which I'm fine with because, Spider-Man origin stories are a little long in the tooth at this point, even for, super fans like us. But I didn't mind it, seeing Stark give him access to all this spider tech was a cool allusion to the fact that when he grows up in the comics, he, through a series of events, starts a company called Parker Industries and uses its R&D team to make crazy spider tech as well.
Parker Industries was technically started by Doc Ock.
No, it absolutely was. We can get into that. I was stating the viewers at home from some confusion.
But don't get me wrong, like I love
but
the
still,
Tark.
that's who he is today. Like he uses tech in that way, and so I thought it was a nice blend in that sense.
Yeah, the Stark Peter relationship is great. So much more so than the Stark random little kid in Iron Man 3 relationship.
Fuck that. That guy sucks so bad.
I've still only seen Iron Man 3 once, and I never want to see it again.
I talk about him so often. He's such a terrible
It was the
actor.
same kid in Jurassic Park, right?
Yeah, it's Jurassic World. Who's the same kid in The Nice Guys. He sucks in all his movies.
I hope that
99% of the time, children ruin movies.
Was the Nice Guys.
I hope that kid tries to make his own Iron Man armor, and it crunches him.
Oh, trash compactor!
Yeah.
He's just like, now to use that Spider-Man tightening technology. Just make me look real.
Too tight.
Oh, there go my nips.
Blew it. What you got for some criticisms?
Two things. No Sokovia Accords for Peter. They even mentioned it in class. There was no... I thought that would have been an interesting dynamic to be like, well, he's getting a little bit more recognizable, and no one came to put a clamp down on him.
Well, that would have been the next step once Tony Stark introduced him to the world. Like that's part. I imagine that was part of the reason why he was introduced him to the public, because
he was gonna
after
make
becoming
it
an Avenger,
unmasked.
he would have to sign on to this Sokovia Accords.
No, but they could have talked about it in the middle of the film when he was doing all the things, like because he literally like had a foot race through, which was a nice homage to Captain America: Winter Soldier, a foot race along the reflection pool.
Yeah. But bear in mind too that like that's something that Tony was trying to keep him out of as well.
Right.
By telling him stay low key, stay close to the
But
ground.
I think they could have driven that further home by saying, stay down to earth, because if you don't, you have to sign these accords that will make you public, and your hot aunt does. You don't want her to find out.
Yeah.
So I think they could have driven that home. The other thing that I want to say is that I think they underpowered the Spidey sense.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I was going to mention that.
out.
Yeah, so
Underpowered, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, like, because they did a great job in Civil War of, like, they had the one scene where the eyes blow up and then he ducks and then the car door goes through the roof, where, like, he was getting blindsided left and right. And so they got all the gadgets and gizmos right, but, like, that's such an integral part of... Spiders don't have that sort of sense naturally, but somehow that's part of his character. And I would have loved to have seen that, especially at the end when they stripped all of the fancy toys. If they really brought it down to like, you have this sense and super strength, go do it.
Spiders totally have that sense. Have you ever seen a spider on your wall turn around to get a shoe and then turn back and it's fucking gone? That's because that Spidey sense was like, that gigantic creature is getting the shit. I need to get the fuck out of here.
One of the best ways I've heard Spider-Man's spider sense described, though, is that he can sense, like, the web of around him. So if something's being moved, he can sense, like, the pulling of the strings of those items.
Yeah, there was an actual, like, statement done by... Maybe it was Kevin Feige or maybe it was someone else on the creative team very recently.
And it was
about how they intentionally didn't want to focus on spider sense for this movie. They wanted to focus on other aspects of his character. I do think that it's, I would love to see more of that because that's one of my favorite things about Spider-Man. That he has to use his his agility as reactionary to these these senses that he gets about incoming danger. But I do think that I don't think that because they didn't necessarily talk about it that it wasn't there. His reflexes, his ability to dodge every single one of those blasts of like purple death ray that shot out of that gun while he was like shooting it down. Like that
Yeah.
to me screams Spider Sense. He's just
Yeah.
reacting, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah. And I will have to say I think they did a better job of leaning on Peter Parker's ability rather than Spider-Man's. That they showed off his like true mechanical like intelligence.
Yeah.
Like he was an engineering student, and they really showed that off.
Yeah.
Also, he's still kind of going through like the puberty. So you don't know when he's done with that. He could have like maximum
getting all sorts
spider
of
sense.
I believe the
Yeah.
war criminal once said, "Your body is changing."
Right now, his spider sense goes off in the middle of the night, and he has to change his sheets.
Spider Sense, I love it.
No, man, but like it's an assumed thing. Like when I watch him dodging, it was like, yeah, of course he knows that's happening.
Spider-Man.
Until you point that out, there was like, well, yeah, but no, that's never been explained that he has those powers. You just assume that, knowing the character as like fans, like we all are, like, well, of course, yeah, he knows when danger's coming, but it's never been like it's even hinted at in this like series of Spider-Man. That's a huge component of his character that's not been like at all explained.
Yeah.
Jesse, what you got?
I'm gonna second Brylan on CGI, especially when the movie first started. It got better as the movie progressed, but I was like, wow, you can really see the strings on this one during the first bit. I've got a weird couple plot points though that like really bothered me. Like for example, why did they go to DC? Like that it had no bearing on the plot whatsoever. Like they could have easily gone to the New York City National Museum.
Well, the bearing on the plot was that it forced Spider-Man to have to hack the spider suit in order to be able to leave the state without being tracked.
Yeah,
Because he leaves the
also-
state, he finds out that he's being tracked.
Also,
so that's just on the
still
path of chasing.
Still a shoehorn.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
No,
Well,
it was
I
closer.
think
It was
that.
closer to Maryland.
But aren't
It was
they?
a great way to put him on the Washington
No,
Monument.
we're like-
They wanted to have a set piece
But
on
he
the
could have
Washington.
done the Empire State Building.
Yeah, but I guess
Sure, get him out of New York though.
I think they also was showing that there's like a we're gonna get back to that area. There's a highly secure facility that's in Washington somewhere that this is where they're taking all those particular kind of weapons.
Yeah, I wanted to hear
So-
more about damage control.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah.
that
I
was
think
they are-
I think
I
that's
haven't
the
wanted damage
introduction.
control ever since Avengers 1.
Yeah.
Thing.
Because I think
So
what's
at
going
least
to
they
happen,
gave us that.
truthfully, is he's trying to pull the door open and it doesn't work, so he ends up hacking it. Later on in one of these movies, somebody's going to blast through that door because they're too powerful.
I guess
to
it
run
is
through
setting
it.
the standard. for something.
That's what I thought, because that's where the truck ended up.
That's cool.
Which is weird that, none of those truck drivers heard any of that shit happening in the back.
I'm also gonna second Abbott on this. There was just too much Iron Man in my Spider-Man. Like the suit was a little too over the top. Like, and even at the end too, after he had gone back to Au Naturel, I just kind of hoped that he would be like, no, I don't need all this tech. And it's like, no, we're putting back on the exact same suit we had before. That sucks. I'm kind of pissed about that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see him put on like maybe like a newer variant, kind of like how they change Iron Man's outfit every other movie. Just do a new costume that's like not all the bells and whistles.
I mean, kind of even echoing on that Abbott's point, I would rather go for something that's more creative. Like, you give me a creative way to use the web that you developed, besides a technology way that gives me over 570 types of
different shots and like the robot that talks to him in his head. I'm like,
and kill mode.
Yeah, kill mode. Which, by the way, it was a throwback to the. I forget the comic, but it's like Spider-Man kills the Marvel Universe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because the eyes do the little red dots, and that's totally what
Why do you keep doing that?
Assassin Spider-Man is. But those are really my two big ones. And I kind of sat there and as I was watching the movie, I'm like, why did they go to DC?
Yeah.
Because especially since Spider-Man's such a New York street level
Yeah.
superhero.
I think
yeah.
I'll also I do think you're right in that sense, and that felt a little out of place. But I will say, from argument, that another aspect of them leaving DC, which was to reinforce the fact for Spider-Man that he was out of his league. He was super arrogant and super childish about wanting to play with the big dogs, wanting to be an Avenger, wanting to be taken seriously by Tony Stark, and he kept overreaching. And like leaving DC, everything about that trip was a shit show for him. Like there wasn't anything good except for him barely saving his friends' lives and getting stuck inside that warehouse. Like all these different things, getting beaten by the Vulture, or at least like knocking himself out. he was out of his element entirely.
Well, now you're making me think too, because at one point he says, "Oh, this is the highest I've ever been."
Yeah.
You never actually get a good moment of Spider-Man swinging through Manhattan from building to building. There's never any of that moment because he's mostly in Queens, just walking around the neighborhood.
Exactly. Yeah, he's still super young and very, very arrogant about where he should be, and that change of pace was to show him that. I think at least.
Also, Mike, you had a good point. You mentioned playing with the big dogs. I think a criticism of mine is that there should have been more dogs in the movie.
Yes.
Like, really cute.
Also bigger.
Yeah,
a
big
cat.
cat.
You had a cat.
Maybe a Malvern.
Yeah, the cat was pretty
Yeah,
bodega cat.
Yeah, a bodega cat.
Yeah. A bodega cat's
It's not a real bodega.
This is sub
Well,
shop.
it's not anymore. It blew up. Thanks, Kyle.
No,
Way to be
did
sensitive.
you? Oh, so you didn't watch the post credits when it was rebuilt by the spiderwebs? That's how they wrapped up the
The
story.
last 2 hours.
By the spiderwebs, it was like stood back up and now a grocery store again. Or were you too confused by the Ramones just playing?
Yeah, they
Yeah,
didn't
just
end
listen
the
to
song too, by the way, with Spider-Man by the Ramones.
Yep, which is the only critique I had, is that they could have
Oh.
closed with the Ramones doing the Spider-Man theme, and they didn't, and that just seems like just such a blatant missed opportunity.
Moreno, anything?
Sure. Yeah, I do have a few criticisms. I mean, I love the shit out of this movie. I was overjoyed the entire time. Little child in me was like going crazy. But I do have a few criticisms. One of which is the secondary characters. You know, your Michelle, your Liz, your Flash, your alleged Cindy Moon. They were all great individually. Whenever they had just themselves in a shot or in a scene. But whenever they were all together, they lacked any sort of real chemistry. That sort of just like bogged down the moment for me every time. Yeah, I don't know. Like there was so much. Maybe it was just overpowered by how awesome Tom Holland and Michael Keaton and the other main characters were. But I felt like the secondary and tertiary characters didn't do enough when they were all together.
Yeah, I mean, like if the dialogue wasn't going through Peter Parker or Spider-Man, I think it died pretty quickly.
Yeah. And like, you know, you'd see a scene where Michelle was by herself and she'd do something funny, like, you know, point out to the teacher that the Washington Monument was built by slaves. Or you'd see like Flash by himself and he is doing this hilarious thing where he's getting a crowd at a party to chant Penis Parker, Penis Parker. But then when they're all in class together, it just kind of fell short.
No.
My other criticism, and this is a bit in line with what everybody else is talking about, which I think shows that it's an actual issue, but it's the CG effects. My issue with it wasn't so much that it looked bad. I mean, I agree with what everyone else said, but the thing that bothered me was that this movie seemed to have far, far more CG than Spider-Man's last appearance in Civil War. Granted, his appearance in Civil War was relatively short, but if you look at just like his scenes in that film, they seem to be way more like heavy on the practical side of his filming his shots than they were in this movie, and I think that it's a fault for this movie. I think it takes away at times. You know, I don't know how you find a balance in that. We all want to see Spider-Man being super agile and traversing around different locations, and that's, you know, maybe that's just too much to film entirely practically. But hopefully that changes up with the next installment of the Spider-Man series, or even the next time he's in an ensemble film, because I think it'll, you know, going back to practical for him is a better look. Also, final criticism. I don't know why Sony had to go ahead and make that like a 15-year-old boy has such a jacked body. I think it's a weird thought to put in everyone's head, and I feel like maybe they could have just like toned it down a little bit.
Yeah, I noticed. Like, I definitely noticed. I mean, I guess like the only thing that I was gonna say, I'll toss it to you, Abbott, is I had just one. I really just had one, and it was kind of a continuity thing. I think tying on to what Jesse had talked about. Of we know that he ran out of web at the end of that battle scene in the fight.
Yep.
So how did he web everything together?
Refilled his cartridge.
Yeah.
He didn't.
From
have
where?
It.
He dropped his bag.
No.
Those natural webs, guys.
That was a Stark plane.
Huh?
That was a Stark plane.
Yeah, it's a Stark plane. We has that. Like, I mean,
Stark
it was just
never
one of the
has-
things. Like, if you pause a scene of him trying to shoot his web, but he has to physically go burn his hands to grab somebody out of the rubble. That's a scene that you showed and be like, cool.
They
I
didn't
get
establish that he didn't have belt cartridges, though. He had been taking them off of his belt.
that. He didn't have belt cartridges because he didn't have the suit.
No,
But his
he was in
original
his
suit
pajamas.
had belt cartridges, or at least had access to cartridges, because the web slingers are his invention.
Yeah.
So
So why
why
didn't
do
he just do
anything
it?
in that moment?
Oh no! I agree. I don't. It's a.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just saying.
So I like that
It
was
poorly done.
Yeah, I mean that was a bunch of stuff. I was like, oh, but then just a way to fix it is just tie him up with rope, like old school, like wire.
It's possible
Something funny.
he picked through the wreckage of the Stark plane crash and just picked up
Yeah,
all of his
that's what I
residual
was
threads.
That's what he's saying. But
Yeah.
like,
Grab
just tie
his
him
rope.
up with rope, right? Or just tie him up with something else, or just don't show the scene. Just show Spider-Man just going through, like, I'm physically using my power. To
Yeah,
run
the
through
I
the
could
fire.
have saved him.
Yeah.
I actually have a question. Because I don't know anything about Spider-Man. Was it always like a mechanical thing,
Yeah.
or
Yes.
was it like he actually?
Well, no.
In the comics,
in the
depends
Tobey
on which-
Maguire movie, it was out of
He's
his.
got the little wrist
And
vagina.
I thought they did the
Which is-
corresponding comic
Which is
run.
Spider-Man 2099.
Yeah,
Right.
2099 has organic.
So there's 2 instances ever though of that naturally occurring for him. Otherwise, he makes his own.
It's
and then a
always
cartridge
like
that
a
he
Which,
like a device
by
that
the
he
way,
like, creates
the-
by doing
the
that
reason
hand
is
motion.
the mechanical one is Stan Lee wanted to have a plot point for him to be able to run out and have them break. So that's why they're mechanical.
But
And
there
also,
are
so he
instances
can
where he
feel
has
safe.
like the actual one coming out of his body.
in the
Yeah.
comics,
Yeah.
Very
you know,
few.
in like the canon 616 Peter
Yeah.
Peter Parker, it's like the web fluid was an invention of his to
Okay.
give himself a way to travel around.
But like
but-
even in the movie, I think Tobey Maguire became dehydrated or something like that. He couldn't.
That was
do
the
it.
stupidest
Yeah.
reason.
But I mean,
couldn't
Yeah.
quite
but,
feel the
th-
spider.
But at least I'm showing you that there is an example out there. There's a movie of it's in his skin and it doesn't work. So
Let's drink more milk.
And it just yeah.
right? Yeah, there's
If I
something-
believe in myself, I'll shoot webs again.
Now, I have a question.
It's called performance anxiety.
Stage fright. So for the folks who had the criticisms regarding the CG in the film, what would be your preference if not the CG? Would you prefer to have Tom Holland and or stuntman in suit over green screen swinging around, or would you prefer like a Jim Henson-esque practical Muppet?
Hand up the ass.
Yep, like
Yeah.
just like really fast in front of the camera.
Jim Henson guys for sure.
Can we have the real actors on green screen with the hand up their ass?
I would just
Hand-fisting.
like
Yeah,
spend a little bit more time on the CG and like add those iconic Manhattan swinging shots. Like I mean that's something I think Sam Raimi's Spider-Man did really well, was capturing those swinging moments.
yeah.
Which
I mean, it was interesting because I think we've seen it done better than what we've seen it.
I think that part was mostly because they were really trying hard to shy away from everything that occurred in the 5 previous
It's like
movies.
forget these
Yeah.
movies.
No Uncle Ben, no great power, no swinging through the city.
no wrestling. That's
No,
fine.
no wrestling.
Yeah.
Well, that's only because Macho Man Randy Savage passed. All right.
Yeah,
All right.
Yeah.
We're going saw.
Oh, cool.
No cranes like unilaterally lining up to
So with that, I would say let's move into some lasting thoughts, and we get into some grades, and we talk about what was some lasting thoughts that we were really excited about, something in the future. No spoilers for that stuff, and also provide your grade. So I'm going to start with Abbott.
I'm very excited for the future, to see where it goes. Just the fact that he was geeking out in the beginning of the movie, and by the end of the movie, he's like, yeah, this is all cool and stuff, because he shows him the Supreme suit, and he's like, nah. Whether he thought it was a test or not, it's just like he wants to do his own thing, and I'm excited to see him just goof off and learn and figure that stuff out. And also for him to get to shoot some webs on MJ. That'd be cool.
15 years old. 15 years old.
Is your grade?
I give it an S+.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
it's not even a real
That
grade.
is great.
All right.
what, you never played a video game? You
Yeah.
get above
S
an A,
is
you
better
get an
than
S.
A. It's
Yeah.
for Super and
Have you
Spider-Man.
never played Mario Kart?
I thought it was for stupid.
Only
is that
if we're
way-
grading you.
Yeah.
All right. Mike Shredder?
Yo, I'm gonna give it an A-. It was great, not an origin film. Like somehow they told an origin film without actually being the traditional Marvel origin, and I thought it was a great twist on that trope that they developed. It was really exciting. I can't wait for the future.
Yeah. Cool. Memo?
I'll do B+.
Awesome. Cool. And Mocha.
Yeah, so this movie wasn't perfect, but as a Spider-Man film, this was even more than what I wanted it to be. So for the Spider-Man franchise, it's getting a straight up A+. As a film in and of itself, A-.
Oh, I thought it was gonna be much lower at your dramatic pause.
Like I said in the beginning, I'm very biased.
That's okay. Cool. Jesse?
I was gonna give it an A- as well.
Okay.
Probably the best Spider-Man film to date, but I would question if it would be in my top 5 Marvel movies.
Oof, yeah, that'd be another conversation. That we
That's
had.
such a big collection.
That's
Yeah,
the thing.
it's
That's less
such
of
a
a knock
big
on
collection.
Spider-Man, more of like an round of applause for Marvel.
Yeah,
So many
like
awesome movies.
they make so many that it's hard to even just keep them in
Is
order.
this the best Spider-Man movie?
Oh
that's
yeah,
out?
that's Spider-Man
Okay.
for sure.
Kyle?
A-, just a really fun movie. I didn't have, I mean, some of the critiques that were, called out were very legit. I didn't have them just because it takes me a while to, usually break down a film into, what I didn't like or anything like that. I just usually come out of it and be like, did I have a really good time just watching that movie? And I had such a fun time. Just different moments where, I sat next to Warren watching the movie and be like, is this about to happen? Were you watching this being, the Parker reveal, when he's about to pick her up for the homecoming date, and just be like, that's why that house is so nice.
Yeah, that happened.
When
Again,
the door opens,
kudos.
oh my god.
Yeah.
The
That
door
was
opens and it's
amazing.
him, and then just Peter's face throughout the whole thing, and that he can't put himself back together and
Yeah.
cover up for it, and the intensity of that moment, that, yeah, A-. It got it so very right, just from the teenage aspect, from not beating the dead uncle, like I already said before, and great power, great responsibility. You didn't have to do all the same things again, but you got a fresh movie out of it and got Spider-Man enjoyable in a new way.
Yeah, my grade for this, I was torn between either A or A-, so I think I'm going to go with an A. I still wanted a little bit more fight scenes, and I think we just got a lot. The small amount that he was in was so awesome in Captain America, the third Captain America. Civil War, thank you. That I was hoping to get that awesomeness then stretched out, but if I know that it's going to be low points, I just wanted to see him actually kind of fight more. I think we didn't get it enough, but I think it's probably going to be coming. So I would say A. Yeah, like I said, I really only had one other weird plot continuity issue before. Brother.
I will give it a B+, and I think it's awesome to see Marvel shake up their formula a bit again, and it's something I haven't really seen or felt in a Marvel movie since Ant-Man, so it's really good to see them kind of step outside the Marvel formula a bit. But it does have some issues with its CG and action shots, and one other thing that's kind of bummed me out was Marissa Tomei's Aunt May was kind of flat in this movie for me, so I don't think she had some really good scenes.
Yeah, that's fair.
I feel like that was they did that on purpose too. It was
Yeah.
it was weird to start with me she's really hot, but then they did downplay her, made her a little more lame and
Older.
Yeah. It's kind of purposeful.
putting the big
but,
glasses on her and just making more out of touch.
That didn't make her less hot.
Yeah.
No. It was despite her hotness. They're let's try and downplay it.
Weird
Not that,
hippie mom.
but let's not try that hard.
Yeah.
So, what's the average? 1 to 10, how many grapefruits?
8.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, 8.5 grapefruits.
Eight for sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, you need that half
Yeah,
At least.
For
Save it for
extracurricular activity.
yeah, exactly.
I got nothing.
That's for the tip.
Anyone else need to clear their throat?
And with that, we would say thank you so much for hanging out with the Down in Front podcast, as this concludes our review of Spider-Man, the latest film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You can find more of our work. We're going to be all over the internet, but before I share my information, Andrew, where can we find more of your work, or what do you do online?
I'm on theabsman.com, and also you can find me on theabsman.tumblr.com.
Okay. Mike the Shredder, what you and your band?
You can find us at My News Music or My News Band, maybe an underscore before those last words, on most major platforms: Facebook, Instagram, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, Yahoo Answers, Netscape, Alta Vista. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Cool.
You can also find me personally at Jesse Rand's Gooey Web Slingers at yman.com.
Sometimes in the penguin tank at the aquarium.
Jesse Rand's Gooey Web Slingers.
At ymail.com.
Definitely put that.
Not Yahoo Mail.
Why mail?
Rocket mail.
Yeah.
Guillermo, anything that we can find on you?
I don't do work.
All right. Mocha Mike.
Yeah, you can see me tweet 140 characters worth of nonsense at my Twitter handle, which is at Mocha Mike LI. It is not at Mocha Mike because, as fans of the pod will know, there is a geriatric man who, for as far as I know, dresses up in skin-tight leotards and hot glues feathers to himself in his room while he's not posting to that Twitter account.
So he's trying to do his own vulture impression of
I
the old
mean,
school
he's doing
version.
his thing. It's more
Yeah.
peacock. But anyway.
That's funny because that's another email that I was going to present. Jesse Rand's Gooey Feather Bottom at gmail.com. So it's funny that he might be the Mocha Mike the at Mocha Mike.
This is my
Just buying up the domains.
Well, that's why I
Selling
had
them
to
off
have
later.
a hot take and think about my Tumblr for a second, because if I give you the wrong one, that's the one where the guy takes a dick pic a day.
I mean, you give us the right
It's
one.
still Andrew. Just his alternate account.
Yeah, not when he's wearing a mask.
He takes a dick pic a day. I don't. It's
Sweet
weird.
thing.
You should check it out.
This week it's a
Honest
Spider-Man
anonymity.
mask. Check me out.
Aside from Twitter, you can follow my photography at Mocha Mike on Instagram. I'm about to head out on a little bit of an adventure, so if you check out my stuff now, you're going to see a whole bunch of pics from overseas, so go ahead and do that.
Cool. Thanks so much, Jesse. Where can we find you on the internet?
You can't.
Damn it.
Too bad.
I hope so. Kyle.
I'd be found at Kyle Kowalski on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, anything like that. I also have a band, Actor Observer, which can be found at Actor Observer. And that's about that.
Cool. Brother.
You can find me posting about bays and fam and everything that regular high school kids post about on the internet.
Fitness spinners.
On Twitter
Tragically
at
hip.
I definitely thought you said bidets and families.
Sharon Thomas.
Yes.
You can find all that fun stuff on Twitter at Prylund. BRILUND.
And with that, my name is Warren, and I should be signing off. You can find a bunch of our work. So we do have a Patreon. Definitely trying to raise enough money to go watch more movies, get more extra reviews out as well. So go find us at patreon.com/downinfront. We do have a lot of other kind of special subscriptions, and Jesse and Kyle are still currently on there, so I'm super excited for that. For any other next reviews, we have a Facebook, we have a YouTube that we can be putting out a lot of live tweets, and we have a Twitter account as well. So our Facebook is facebook.com/DIF podcast. That's Facebook Down in Front podcast, as well as our tweet or our Twitter is @_JFP. That's @_Down in Front podcast. If you don't have an iOS device, we're also in Stitcher. You can find us on any other major platforms. Just search for the podcast itself, called Down in Front. And we will be linking the show notes to the actual YouTube, as well as both of Mike Blue's emails. So with that, we will say thanks so much for hanging out with us, and we'll see you later.
Peace.